Whole situation is shady. Yeah. So, moral of the story is, for what it's worth, we should make it work. If you can't, then don't. Duke, if she take your baby, at least try to find out where the baby is. Chicks, stop using your baby as collateral. It's not fair. And babies, please forgive mommy and daddy for all the bullshit. Because in the end, you the most important thing.
Peace, human families in the planet Earth. I am your host, Aseer the Duke. You have now tuned in live to Super Heru Radio. Again, I am your host, Aseer the Duke, along with my co-host, Selena, the Empress of 10,000 years, a moral side by side, the whole Super Heru family, you, on this great Malkuth Day.
This is the day that the moon
Malkuth.
approaches Jupiter.
This is the day that the moon approaches to Jupiter, so this is a good day of expansion. And it's no coincidence that Malkuth, a.k.a. Martin Luther King Day, was today. Wasn't it today? Is it today? Yes, today. As well as the so-called inauguration for the last president of the United States. I say the last because in that he represents a turning point in the post-December 21st world. And as we are now embarking on the next 26,000 years or 25,000 year cycle, this is a time for us to start to create and redefine who and what we are to be in this next age as we move closer to its density. Now, anybody that has been listening to what we've been building on and all of that over the years, you would know that we never said or never put out there that the world was going to end and all that crap that they were telling everybody was going to happen on December 1st. What we did say is that what would end would be the ability for the illusion to constantly subsist upon the illusionary tactics it's been using for the past 26,000 years. Well, that's not true. For the past 250 years in our sphere of influential or temporal influence. And based on that confluence of different energies coming together, we are now at a point where karmically those of us who have chosen the path of learning more of self are now in a position to do that and are in a position to almost be aided by elements of the enemy to do so, as well as the so-called powers or what people will perceive as the powers that's holding them down. The perception of what government is and what government was is no longer a constant in this country, because just as your man Lincoln took control and during that period of the Civil War used it to empower and enact all of these war power amendments that after the Civil War were supposed to be rescinded. What you have to realize is that the man was dealing with a lot of different confluences based upon the different agreements, both exoteric and esoteric, that were taking place within that given time frame. Because like I've always said, if you get books like Forgotten Cause of the Civil War or books like John Drew's Cherokee Regiment, it's called Confederate Cherokee. You should definitely get that book, read that. Free Blacks and Confederate Yankees. When you read these books, you start to realize that there was a different climate of what we perceive slavery being as it was coming and going, and that there was actually 3 different types of slave trades going on at the same time. But what history has done is just like it does everything else, is jumble it all up together, and now we got to deal with that. So the problems come into play when we try or we start to facilitate the Joker. We start to facilitate different areas in our so-called history to reevaluate that which we have come to accept as gospel doctrine. Now, I'm not talking about, you can't use biblical words without people thinking you talk about Jesus. But I'm not necessarily talking about that. I'm talking about the sphere of influence that has now started to perpetuate itself within our community now. Now that the people have been browbeat to death with all of these different forms of civil strife, right? Now the same people want to create different little groups and summits and stuff like that to create a way to bring them all together. But the same poison that was in the meal the first time it was cooked up is going to be in the second meal too, because it's the same chef. My grandmother used to say, and I said this in a rap one time, I said, don't blame the butcher don't blame the baker when the butcher bakes the bread. And that's real, man. You can't blame this dude when you know this dude has already been corruptible. And the main thing that's happening now is that they want everyone to be born in a form of disorder, meaning that they want everybody to have the same amount of dirt on them so that way they can work. And then the people who have chosen themselves or have been chosen by puppet people to be the quote-unquote illuminated ones, right, are the ones who will then ascend to whatever primary position. But to do that, like any so-called Muslim, the deal was that you had to present 4 devils or the heads of 4 different devils. This is equivalent to somebody signing a record label with, let's say, Iveen, and then he makes enough money where he's able to start his own record label, and then he signs people to that record label under him. So essentially, because Iveen is the head of the totem pole, then that means when he signs, his artists are essentially under Iveen. So elementally, what's happening is that everybody is paying for the privilege to work with them.
I already bought the tickets to
Mm-hmm.
We have been going back to that.
Great. Okay. And and that's what happens, So in our quote-unquote movement, or lack thereof, what I find is that the people are not necessarily the problem, meaning that the people are not necessarily the ones in the position that are causing most of the confusion. The confusion is coming from the people who want to use their intellect to lord over the people. You understand? But like they said in the Panthers, the people united will never be defeated. So what we have to do is disunite the people. And the way we do that is to create different ideologies for them to function through as quasi-realities that they will then conform their whole life to, because they know that, well, it's known about us as original people. When we choose to endeavor on a creative tip, that we will devote everything to that. Think about this. When black men and black women become or get government jobs or start working for the man like that, they become the most loyal, the most virile. They're not going to do nothing that's going to upset that job. You understand? They're not going to talk to that white man but so way or whatever. They're going to be how they got to be and take what they got to take to keep that job. That's because we have been so disenfranchised from owning things or feeling like we can own things that we don't have a sense of entrepreneurship the way that we used to. Well, at least we didn't up until the conscious community came on the scene. Because that's the only thing that's not, in my opinion, being in it, that was the only thing that was allowing us to make sense of what was happening around us. From the first Brother Dawood tape I watched all the way to maybe the last Stephen Freeman now tape. You know what I mean? From back in the day, as a Brother Big Man, and these people were coming down, and Khalil was throwing the scene and all that. We was going hard, But the seeds that would act to be the dissension within us would reveal themselves eventually. And it started to happen, like I said, as the different layers or tiers, if you will, started to be established within the community, because you had a lot of people that weren't, a lot of scholars who weren't taking control of their own intellectual property. They weren't striving to do things to make sure that they would not be exploited, especially by their own people, because then that would show the white man that, hey, they're not even letting their own people exploit them, so we can't. You see? And this is somewhat the problem. Because to this day, people still send me stuff sometimes. There was a site, Melanin DVDs. They got everybody's DVDs on there because what it be, these be dummy DVD sites for the same people. And when you expose one, just like a rat, you shut them down. You get them shut down by PayPal for having their shit on there. And then what they'll do is they'll just create another name and call it something else. Because what we have to accept, brothers and sisters, is that not all so-called black people want to be free, or I'll take it even further, are supposed to be. A lot of these people don't want that type of freedom that you're talking about, to be totally autonomous and working for self and having your own community. It sound good, it sound nice, it sound like that's what niggas supposed to do, but to really do that, think of what it really takes to found a government. Do you understand that all of the years these Freemasons have been making these agreements, because all of these agreements were hedged on one meeting. And that meeting at Wilhelmsbad in 1782, as it reorganized all of the Bavarians as well as the true purpose of the Alumbrados, which, again, was the original Illuminati founded after 1492 by members of the De Medicis and all of that, specifically the Day line of Moore. See, what we have to understand is when Hugh de Payon was doing what he was doing, he wasn't the main man. He founded the Templars, but before they became Templars, they were French knights or Gallic knights, right? And their purpose in terms of carrying on the Lucifer experiment, which is also called Lucifer unraveling, which again is another aspect, is another way of saying the Jacobian experiment. They're both the same thing. Lucifer, Jacob, the experiment is the same thing. So as it is the same thing, we can't start to separate it, because then what happens is we look at it from a different perspective and not the whole. If one knows the story of Jacob, you can see how he was manifest or be the so-called devil. You understand? Which is what Elijah Muhammad, peace be upon him, was alluding to. Yet we live in a time where all of our so-called traditions and ancestral knowledge is going to be challenged by people that look exactly like you. So people like you that was coming out maybe in 2001, 2002, telling you this about the prophet or this about this person, are now on this tip now going to give you a whole nother view in which they're going to be going against the same so-called prophet or whatever that they was bigging up to you maybe not only 5 to 6 years ago or maybe last week. And this is a problem. Or this is the problem in the sense that those who do not know their history are bound to repeat it. We are repeating negative Luciferian cycles based upon our non-acceptance of what we see happening, because the boundaries between the so-called realms of the seen and unseen are slowly dissipating. And as we move, or those of us that want to move into a truly free national perspective, we'll be taking control of Malkuth. That's why the inauguration was today, because MLK doesn't mean it's not short for Martin Luther King. It's short for Malkuth. And Malkuth
is the kingdom. Now, Kuf is the kingdom, but the kingdom is also in the ancient Hebrew, or again, the ancient Moorish, is Chadem, right? The Ashkenazims came and added the hard H, which then got corrupted to the kosher K after the introduction of the of the so-called Zionists, who based themselves off of what the Moorish Zionists was doing out of the Canaanite temple, the very first Canaanite temple that was set up by Suleiman. So what I see goes on, or used to go down, was that there was a master and an adept situation. There was a master, apprentice situation, and then there was the adept situation. I don't know how anybody, especially a Moor, could hide any Masonic affiliation or any Masonic symbolism or allegory when it comes to Moorish science. It's rampant. It's obvious. But that's because, remember, who founded the Masons in the modern times to preserve that ancient text? That was not coming from the Romans, the Days, the descendants of the Holy Roman Empire. They were trying to find a way back into that by the time of World War I or World War II. They were striving to find a way back into the original man, the so-called day line or the days. That's why those people who choose the term day as a title, which you can choose based upon this House Joint Resolution 75. So in that, when you use that, you got to be careful, because what you're doing is tracing or saying that you're descended from the line of Moors that chose. Okay, from that line, those line of Moors who chose to go back into the genetic Yaqub thing and try to create a different race, mainly switch up their genetics by what they chose to amalgamate with. So around the same time the Neanderthal starts to disappear or whatever, you get certain traits of them still evident. And those Moorish Turks that descended from monk, meaning the Moors that were meant to guard these Perigenes albanus Gauls, otherwise known as Homo Germanicus, also known as Neanderthal, also known as Sasquatch, Yeti, Wendigo, whatever, werewolf, vampire. These were aspects of them that were always set there to guard and keep them people locked up. But throughout the centuries, some of these people, again, started to interbreed with some of these ones that would try to come out of the mountains, come out of the hills, the caves, the holes. Don't believe me? Like I said, go research Zana, Z-A-N-N-A. One of the first Neanderthals in modern times they actually used and actually turned to a sex slave out in Russia, which she brought the so-called quasi-human children. They're calling her the human. They're calling the children that this woman produced the human. So, as you can see, the term human then is an outcropping or an offshoot of the Neanderthal race, as it is opposed to, or as it is defined by the so-called modern anthropologists, who are now saying that all people who are not born with melanin as a predominant on the dermis are then, or do then, have Neanderthal traits. So that means then that you, original people or Asiatic people or original people who choose to accept the fact that they are of the Asiatic race, are then something different. So if that's the case, when this dude is on the podium now telling you that you're all created equal, created by who? The true and living, everlasting soul, mother, father, father, mother, eternal creator God that existed the second before the Big Bang and all that went down, that allowed the sublime aspect of imperfection that we call third density to mature and manifest for us to incarnate into, to help raise it up, for it to learn more about itself. That God is defined by love, truth,
freedom, justice, peace, truth, love, truth, peace, freedom, justice, and equality. That's Ma'at. That's also the great law of the Great Spirit, or the great law of Hiawatha Degandawada, also called the great law of Gaianashqua, sung by the hymns of the Tamazid Moors in what's called North Africa, in the hymns of the Guana, of the troubadours or the Mataboot Moors over there, that sung in the hymns of the Hopi and the Dogon, right? So that created something different. That's something dealing now with something eternal. But now we talking about the Creator or the Lord of, let's say, hosts now, because the Bible talk about a lot of different people. Talk about God, the Almighty God, the Lord God, the everlasting God, right? The Lord of hosts, the God of hosts, right? So is the Lord of hosts the true and living God? No. Because if it was the true and living God, why would you call it the Lord of hosts? When, like I said, when you look at the movie Lincoln, this dude was talking in biblical terms all the time. And this is how we have to start to think of things. See, the Bible is, as they say, as Killer Priest put, the basic instruction before leaving earth. Therefore, it is a universal doctrine or lexicon that you can use to bind different lower spirits. That's why the prophet said, don't throw away your Bible. But now in the era in which the prophet, again, will be attacked, the same way that they attack everybody else, you see, he's put on par with everybody else. As much as W.B. Du Bois was talking all of that Negro shit, in the end, he repopulated back to Ghana. And then lamented all of the COINTELPRO stuff he was doing against Marcus Garvey. But that was done to discourage the relationship between Marcus Garvey and the prophet, and the fact that Marcus Garvey was to establish the army that would accompany the prophet and protect black people against the terrorist organization created by members of the now bleached out Holy Roman Empire through something called the Kleegrat and the Order of the Cyclops, which is transcended then through the Grand Dragon and entered in now through what they call the Hammerskins, and then trickled down into the Nazis, then into the neo-Nazis. They don't even know their whole culture is revolving around Moorish science. But Moorish science is not dependent upon or is not limited to what was set down necessarily by the prophet. This is something that is indigenously in part and intrinsically a part of your very genetic makeup. So it's what you are as an Asiatic of that race. And the Moors being those so-called melanated souls that incarnated from time immemorial into bodies that were meant to uplift the so-called human condition and put people into a better way of being by example and by deed and action. The said word, the written word, and the acted word. The logos. This is the traveling without moving in terms of the conveyance of ideas. This is the transcendence, again, of us as original people evolving into what we're supposed to be, or back to the phrase in which we can put all of this stuff back together as what it really is, which is really a map and blueprint between how we rose and fell and then rose again. Osar, when you read the Emerald Tablet, was the first original man to die, resurrect himself with the help of his queen. Yet, if the ritual is to be continued or is to emulate, then that means then that the original woman is paramount in the resurrection of the black family. But the Herods, this is why you got to know the Bible, because then you know the players. The Herods, or the descendants of the Herods, were those Canaanites that were against people reactivating the pineal organ, which would then reactivate the aspect of them that would yearn to go back to the point of the one, or the whole, or the kingdom, or the kadem, or the temple, which would then cause mass pilgrimages back over here. Your country is called Alamanicanos Estados. Not because I say so, not because that's some shit that I made up. This is what they was calling you prior to a certain time, or calling this place prior to a certain time. Therefore, Alamanicanos Estados, meaning the perpetual state, or the state of the Moors, or divine Moors, right, cannot then be the Al-Moroccan Empire. That would have to then be something else. You see? Because if it wasn't, then it would be called that. You see? Therefore, the Al-Moroccan Empire had to then be something that was some sort of a union that would be identified by a symbol that we understand as the pyramid, or the triangle. Right? So when I was coming up, the whole slave thing was called the triangle trade. So if the pyramid is a triangle, the triangle is the pyramid. The pyramid was the symbol of the Moors from Alamanicanos, right, from time of antiquity. But at the same time, the Al-Moroccan Empire is the conjoined union between the pure-blooded, or let's say the continuous Canaanites, meaning the Moors that never left over here, right, and their so-called Moabite brethren, which represented the culmination of the Chaldean, Elamite, Dravidian, Southeast Asian, so-called Phoenician, Lydian, Hittite, Midianite, Macedonian, Etruscan, Minoan, Corinthian, Dorian, these ancient peoples all basically comprise the so-called Moabite race, because these were the ones that had the ability, based upon the Phoenician connection, again, the Carthaginian connection, the Moorish connection, would allow them to come back and forth. Those people who were in or down with the so-called Asiatic Brotherhood, because this was seen, again, as the place where the gods existed, or the place that nobody else over there was. So now today they're trying to conscribe the first settlers, or the first people coming over here and meeting these so-called people they want you to believe as Native Americans was here first. They want you to believe that those people were Vikings. Well, even if that's the case, when we look at how the Vikings basically came up, they came up out of basically a slave rebellion of Neanderthals who, after dealing with the ancient so-called Norsemen, right, or Morsemen, right, who were already traversing the seas back and forth from time immemorial, they had already set up these ancient roots and these ways of building these ships. And in the process of slaving and taking all of these different so-called Caucasoid groups, not black Caucasoid, but let's say Eurozoids, from those people who had that Neanderthal trait in them, these were the ones that were basically brought up and put into the form of fighting and became the first so-called wild Germanian hordes that these Moors would basically let loose on people when they were trying to soften up a region that they were basically going to take over. But eventually these dudes basically learned their ways and adopted aspects of that, and then Wotan becomes Odin, you see? And then gods like Ogun or Thorfinn, Thorfinn the Black, or like Kenneth the Dub, all of these black Scotsmen and black Danes and Moors and all of that, they traditionally, ancestrally, were all black. They don't want to tell you that. They don't want to really get into that because they always want us to have a Eurocized version of everything. Even when they find artifacts over here, they always seem to find the ancient ones that have some sort of Egyptian thing. It always got some type of blonde-haired, blue-eyed person. That's part of the game. That's part of the masonry thing to do that, because they can't bless you, they can't not have your empire represented, because we're the portal that they get everything done through. So everybody got to see us, but they want to make us like we're the Pinocchio, and they're the Geppetto, making us dance and stuff. And in that, people love Geppetto through the puppet, and that's kind of how they're running their government and their world. Yet that is the only way they could run their government in their world, you see. So after the prophet did what he needed to do, and those Moors in those American states were recognized in February, the minutes of that were translated up to the War Department, and something had to be done because the full faith and credit of the United States, meaning, the full faith and credit of the American people, i.e. the Moors, the L's and Bays, the people whose property they confiscated after World War II, after World War I, after the Civil War, after the Revolutionary War. All of these were secured in these banks that existed that were all funded initially from the money that Hiram Solomon put up for them all to wage their little campaign. So in that way, it's still us. And if he was a Sephardic Jew, that means, again, he was a Moorish Hebrew, which means he was a Moorish American. Understand? So there's an ancestral trust, definitely, that's left for us to inherit, and that's why you have things called the National Archives and all of that. That's why you have to have those things, because that's what represents the true republic. Yet all of this is vested in secret in these little Scottish Rite groups that function as temples or mosques or whatever, but really they're all basically asset desks for people to be sequestered from and gather the general post of where the Blue Lodge or whatever low-level masonry people are at the time. And then adjutants are put in the community to further exacerbate wrong information or right information put in an exaggerated context. So, as a researcher, I know not only do you have to, when you're researching something, let's say that happened in 1912, you have to not look at it from the perspective of somebody from 2013. Because the 2013 mind state is predicated on what was going back then, but what was going on back then was primarily back then. So I can't bring my own 20th century or 21st century values into a situation when I have to take into account that most people that look like me were on some other shit. But then again, that's why you can superimpose yourself to a time like that, because the same thing as then is going on now, because the same people have been perpetuating the same idea. And that idea is that we are all something else other than what we individually identify or agree or accept we are. So in a world like that, identity theft is a part of that existence, because you can be anything. A strong man can be anything. A Negro can be anybody. That's why you see so many white niggas and so many Asian niggas, so many Indian niggas. Yet all the niggas is trying to look white, trying to bleach, because that was the custom of the days, you see? Because remember, most of these days were interbred with white slaves, but these white slaves that were first taken up by the Osmanali mystic Turks between 900 and 1600, these Mamluks, these were hardened assassins that were raised, white people that was raised by these Moors to only defend Islam and kill and enslave other Caucasian people to the so-called faith as soldiers. Now, they didn't have the true clearance because there was always a Moor that was there above the Sultan advising him, because that was the true ruler, you see. This is how Moors started to do it after a while. And because the Turks kind of got down like that, they were the ones who were there to keep the mystic secret. They represent the sword on the Masonic fez. And then the name above the Masonic fez represents the Moor or the Moorish family that owned whatever name is at the bottom, or whatever position in the empire was at the bottom, or founded whatever temple that was at the bottom. That's why every Fed say something different. But this type of knowledge, like I said, is even kept from those high ones that's on TV, that's in these grand temples and these Scottish Rite Lodges and all of that. And because they honor their oath, they are allowed to maintain those places. But a true Moor, if they are really following their oaths, once fully presented and truth credentials presented, they're supposed to hand the keys to the lodge over to you. When you're in your proper, when you're in prior persona, your true person. But your true person is represented by the protocol by which you bring it into existence. And so this is where the Biff Lomans come in, the death of a salesman. This whole thing comes in when niggas start to pitch you all these different ways into heaven. See? And try to make you feel that, like I said, customarily in international law, you, in ancient times, let's say, like in times of Udal being the capital of, being the island capital of, whose capital was Poseidon or Poseidonus in the so-called time of what they call Atlantis. In Udal, the legend says that they were at the high point of pineal activation. At this time, the pineal gland is about the size of an orange. So at this point, they're able to not only transcend time and matter, but manifest matter as time. Therefore, the time span in living now becomes something that is inconsequential because it's not vested in the body. It's vested in the transcendence from the body to the soul, from the soul to the body. That's why when you look at the pyramids, next time you watch these archaeologists and somebody start talking to you about pyramids, ask them why the oldest bricks and oldest blocks is at the top of the pyramid and not the bottom. Because, again, it was built from the top down on a fifth dimensional plane that was altered or became altered in time based upon the blocks actualizing themselves based upon the true spiritual architect's vision of what it was, which, again, was the physical manifestation of a Merkaba that could be activated through physical means due to the downgrading of the Asiatics into, let's say, Atlantean status, and then from Atlantean into, so-called human, or what would be human, which really is a soup that can be anything. That's why you can watch movies with aliens, and you can have so many different types of aliens hiding in the human form. That's because the Lord of Hosts, Yaqub, created the vessel of that entity to be able to occupy the different realms to be able to exist in without becoming physical, but manifesting as a physical version of whatever the worst thing the individual that they're living in is afraid of. And then becoming that, and then using that as a seat to then put the person on push button. So those people with missing time and things like that, you have to understand within the community that there are people who are triggered to do shit like that. Same way they got Sandy Hook and these people out there, they got them right here in your own communities. You see them every day. Yeah, claims like that, not to create fear, but to be aware. It's true. Not to be fearful to you, but to be real. And the more you access you, meaning divine who and what you are in this process, through understanding what your true culture is and what your true nationality is for you, the more you're able to transcend and repel that sort of energy from entering into your sphere of influence. This is how our ancestors were able to just walk out of certain realities. This is why you can be somewhere and then be out. You know what I'm saying? Not tell nobody sometimes, because sometimes there has to be a time in which you can express that aspect of you that is hidden. That's the Amen side. That was the problem with that war that went down with those Moors over in the old world, in the new world, which they would say is the old world, Egypt, which they say is Old Kingdom Egypt, which is really New Kingdom Egypt. Old Kingdom Egypt was over here, in which they fought this war and then created the system by not telling everybody that each god represented an aspect of a chromosome or a Sephiroth. Instead, they started to teach the people that these things were actual literal interpretations of these people who at one time did exist, but whose essence and what they did became a perpetual way for them to exist based upon the representations of those actions to the generations that preceded them. This is the time that we are now in which now the Herod people I was talking about, who come out of the Sadducees and the Pharisees, which today would be the B'nai B'rith and Mossad, MI6, any clandestine agency like that. These are the people who are there to perpetuate the falsehood against Esau, so that way he does not re-perpetuate his nation. Yet before you can start a nation, you have to repatriate yourself back to what it is. You always hear about you always hear about expatriation. But expatriation to where? If you're a 14th Amendment citizen and you want to be an expat, that means if you leave this country, you don't have no other country to go to, because technically you're free, but you're still a 14th Amendment citizen. Therefore, the debts of that old country still have sway over your future events. This is why people, when they do whatever, they go and try to get new Social Security numbers and all of that, making it harder for real people like us. Because everybody's trying to be you. Everybody is trying to be what you naturally were. And that's the problem. Nobody is in their own station. Everybody trying to be something else. They're just saying, okay, this person is whack because he wasn't wearing a fez, but then, this person's not wearing a fez either. Then this person say the fez is the white man, and this person say that the fez is this one, and this one say is that one. And everybody's entitled to their opinion, just like I'm entitled to mine. But in representing that opinion, I have to represent it from a perspective that is one of an observer. Because as a direct influence in anything like that, I'm not here for that. You get what I'm saying? Like, I'm not here to tell anybody that this is how, or this is the way, this is the light, this is how you should do it. I'm saying based upon the evidence that's existed, based upon my abilities as me, a living soul, in my years on this planet to get to this point, to be able to disseminate it like this to you, this is my debriefing. That's what these things are every Monday. These are debriefings to humanity, not just to our people, but to the people that our people created and then their people created. Because, again, a human is a colored man. That's somebody that's hewn, that's made. We were created in the image of. Therefore, in the perpetual space of the unknown and what we perceive as the everlasting oneness that some, in a literal term, could call God, there is an arm, leg, arm, head in there. But then that means okay, well, who was the God that created that God? What was the family that God came from? And the only way you could get to that is by surrendering and giving to the all. That's why each religion say a different thing. Buddha says, enlighten yourself. Jesus or Isa says, decide. You know what I mean? Allah says, submit. You know what I mean? Krishna says, what does Krishna say? See? Krishna says, let all things be, or let all things exist. You see? But within each one of those, all of those came from one tone, and that one tone that brought everything into existence is the thing that existed before everything and everybody. But within that, existed, everybody existed. Because as a thought, things become. Therefore, things become the thoughts that they eventually be. And from being, we are seen as society, civilization, so-called race. So if you think about it, the Asiatic race was at its height and then went into a dormancy. And then what replaced it was a Negro African, some sort of hodgepodge or homogenous race that was accumulated based upon other people's association of what that was. But the people giving them that association looked like them, but didn't dress or acted or spoke like them in custom. Yet, based upon the melanin evidence, this was still a representation of their people. But their customs were so foreign, they might as well have been white. You see what I'm saying? Or what people would perceive as Caucasian, which is an erroneous designation for what people perceive as white people, because when you go to Russia and ask them what a Caucasian is, they tell you a black person, anciently and ancestrally, because you ruled over there too. He who fell from heaven but did not, he who came from heaven to bear the good news but did not lose their true station. Meaning those who could be working in the cipher as an advisor or this or that, but not under the jurisdiction of the same society that they're administrating and doing everything through. That's why they got rid of the Napoleon and them got rid of the Moors and during the French Revolution. Everybody want credit because everybody got egos with shit, and that's not what this is about. I have no problem respecting anybody that's putting anything down that's contributing to the upliftment of fallen humanity and the resurrection of the Asiatic race. Black, white, Chinese, anything that supports that, I'm in support of. That has nothing to do with me wanting to be anything other than what I am. So what I receive from that has to be positive because I'm not trying to take anything from anybody. I'm trying to see what I can do to add on if I can. But if I can't, I'm not going to beat myself up or try to martyr myself because I'm not a Christian. That's what Christians do. Jews deal with guilt. Jews deal with guilt and denial. Muslims, Persians deal with tradition. Africans deal with tradition, clanism, tribalism. You see? These are all offshoots of political ideas and agendas left over from different coups d'etats and revolutions that took place as the Holy Roman Empire became what it is today. When they could not use us for any money, look at the pattern of events. In 28, the prophet comes, he gets the mandate, he basically solidifies and nationalizes everybody, creates the temple. 29, he leaves us. By 30, they already finding a new way to deal with shit because they can't use the money of the American people, so they start working on something else. Roosevelt decrees that he has to have to stay in for an unprecedented third term. Right? They do the New Deal. Then after the New Deal, let's say that goes down in what? March. Right? By April, they ratify it. By June, they've already went in on House Joint 75. By May, they ratify that. By that July or June, they go into formal bankruptcy and then go into reorganization. So right before they go into reorganization, they both agree to recognize these people, annexation of these 2 or 3 little words at the end of their name, trumping state law that says that those people are Negroes. You see, this is why the state don't want to acknowledge that. You see? But because you are an American, you were given back the right through the 13th Amendment, 20th section, Article 7, taken from an international point of view that allows you to look at what the United States is and was to become as a body politic. They could say what they want about this not being religious and all the Masonic books and all of that, but when he was in the public, Washington was in the public, he was doing things and speaking things into existence in the manner of a freed white Christian, who also happened to be an esquire, meaning a page to the queen and the king. At the same time, he was trying to lead them as a so-called president of the colony. At the same time, being the generalissimo of the Continental Armies appointed by John Hanson Bay during the so-called Revolutionary War, based upon Bay's connection to the Barbary pirates and being Swedish and Dutch. All connecting back to the Hanoverian dynasty that was ruled really by 2 Moors named Muhammad and Mustafa on behest of the German Bavarian king who didn't speak English. He only spoke German. So the language of the court was German and French. So the British people couldn't really talk to him, so they could only talk to the Moors. So the Moors became the voice for the king. And as they were his body servants, they were meant to pick out his clothes, what he could say, what he could eat, what he could write. So how was he really in control if they dictated every aspect of his life? One of them, I think it was Mustafa, Muhammad. Mustafa became Christian. But he kept his Moorish nationality. They kept their nationality. He kept his nationality. So this shows you, again, how it was over there with these people in terms of what they perceive as the elite and how those practices were used to authentically bleach out the family by moving different darker Moors and lighter Moors into different conjugal relationships. The same thing was mirrored in Louisiana and Old France, Missouri, during this period, in which produced what eventually they called the Arcadian people, or the Creole, or the Quadroon, and then the Octoroon, and then the Mandroon, the Octoroon, the Quadroon, and the Mulatto, then the Mestizo. And then above all of that was the caste of whites, which was reserved for those Scottish Rite trained white male Freemasons who were given limited autonomy based upon their forefathers' fight for freedom in the so-called Revolutionary War against the decaying Moorish Empire. So in the 1800s, while roots and all of that was going on, white people were being enslaved by the millions worldwide. You understand? So the ascendancy of the so-called white race had to be also accentuated by something that was still somewhat Moorish, which is why the Skull and Bones people, who are the interface between the German houses like Blackstone and Thule and the so-called American, Confederate KKK, Knights of Malta, these type people, Knights of Columbus, they all operate under the Moorish Jolly Roger flag, or, adopt the colors and things like that. But they pervert it based upon the Baphomet influence, the Luciferian influence, which is really the Yakubian influence, which is why they're so obsessed with gene pooling and splicing and cloning and drafting and cyborging and plastic parts and figure asses and figure tits. All of this is a form of regeneration for them. They need artificial means to exist. They can't exist just solely by themselves. And anyone that emulates that form of life, the pineal gland orchestrates the world around them to accommodate that. This is what's called a never-ending story. That's why the flower of life was whole, whereas you look at the so-called Luciferian flower of life, which is called the Lucifer unraveling, it's the unraveling of it, because whoever attempts the Yakubian experiment, the Lucifer experiment, winds up in destruction, because there's no love in that. To worship the body without the soul would be to praise the car for the drive and diss the driver. You know what I'm saying? So the different side plays and back agreements that were made between the different political and spiritual figures of the time always should be put in a context of who and what is being represented as the intent. If the intent comes off disrespectful, you see what I'm saying, then there's aspects of it that is. It doesn't excuse the action of anyone, but it is to say that, like everything, we are made and unmade by what we say we are. It's only now that you see images of really poor white people and decrepit white people and homeless and stuff like that, and white people acting like black people, like niggers, the same nigger, and all this other stuff. Well, it's only now you see that, because it's done. You see? The oppressive aspect of what that word could represent was done. And so the spiritual end of things like Black History Month, things like that, will be hard for those old remnants of the Holy Romans that bleached in and bred in through the Louisiana Channel, and then as well as the Algonquin Channel. And because so many of the so-called civilized tribes got up and buying and freeing these so-called white people and reinstituting them as Cherokees and letting them adopt ways that they really didn't understand, this became the opposite of what we set out everything to be. So as there was no longer any true remnants of how we were to function, different people then just took what was there and built off of that. You see what I'm saying? And that's how a lot of so-called slave traditions and modern traditions got started. When they brought these people over here from Mali, they were speaking Dinka or whatever they were speaking. They didn't know what was really going on here. So any black person they seen was probably a little lighter or brown skin or whatever, and didn't really deal with them because they were speaking the same language as the masses. So they seen them as the same as the white men. You understand? Because in a lot of cases they were. In a lot of cases it was flipped. And then they were given this false education and then built upon that education, and they had to build a language around that education. And then because that education was not coming through a religious context, through what they was calling the Bible that they was getting the house niggas to give them, right? This became the doctrine that they chose to be, and that's what they chose or understood they were. Negroes, contraband, colored, whatever it was, up until somebody else came and challenged the notion of what it was, and then that's not what it was anymore. But prior to this year, I couldn't even say what the name of the country was, really, or our country. Openly, because these people And I'm not just talking about people in our community. I'm talking about Alex John. I'm talking about all these people, Jesse Ventura. All of these people are sworn into this thing. And anyone sworn, again, is being taking something that was freely theirs and given over under forceful obligation. That is a form of coercion, which then makes the initial reason for it sworn into then being something now more of weight and merit, but on a penal end, a masculine end, you see, a Martian end. And this is what's happening in a place like Syria and all that today. The reason why Hillary Clinton getting throat cancer and falling down and busting her head and all this other shit, because she, man, she talking out of two faces. You saying you hate Al-Qaeda, but then you meet with Al-Qaeda in secret in Marrakesh. See what I'm saying? And at the same time, doing that, you gearing everybody up for this next African invasion. So these brothers think they're going home, and then you really sending them to Central Africa. Start shit with these Central African people now. Go up in the mountains and the hills and that. Turn that to a new Vietnam. To what? Get people in for the next 100 years? So what is this? This is an American. So on one level, this is an American conquest of Africa, just like it was an American conquest of Arabia. But remember, Arabia is Africa. It's all Africa. Africa is the code for the whole planet. You know what I'm saying? Just like Ethiopia was. This is why certain things were meant to become hallmarks of our culture, for us to be able to have a measuring stick to, not to use it to defame it, to break it down, to say that it's this, to all of that. These white people don't do that. These white people stand behind a lie like it's the truth every day. Every day I see them lying. Every day I see them throwing them signs. Every day I see it. And again, they've created buzzwords in the same society that turn people off. So as soon as you hear somebody talking about real, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. Look up the word conspiracy. Look up the word theory. Isn't relativity a theory? Aren't they using that to get into space? Right? Theo, there's something with God in that. They don't want you to do the knowledge to. So if you're a Muslim, just read the Quran. If you're a Christian, just read the Bible. That's what they want you to do. They want you to be so turned off from anything that may look like you but don't speak or dress like you, that you think that it's not you. Is it a coincidence that the Russians have a red flag with a star and a crescent on it? Is it a coincidence that they all worship the Black Madonna? Is it a coincidence that the Kremlin looks like the mosque at Baghdad? Is it a coincidence that Alexander Pushkin, Lord Pushkin, Prince Pushkin, a prince of the Russian Empire, a descendant of the Holy Roman Empire, through Abraham Petrovich Hannibal, an Ethiopian taken in the Crimean War from a Turk, who gave him as a gift to the Emir Peter the Great, who raised him as a prince and put him at the head of the entire empire, basically to mimic Mustafa and Muhammad's tradition that was given to the Holy Roman emperors to make sure that the breathing would be done in a certain manner. Is it a coincidence that they would kill the whole family? Right? Except Anastasia, allegedly the great ancestor of Princess Diana and Dodi, right? The whole Romeo and Juliet, the Montagues and the Capulets. This is all the same Moorish history through the Holy Roman Emperor, and because that was the last channel that came out of the Islamic channel that was suppressed for them to create the shrindom, to enshrine our empire in the language and the culture without truly representing it publicly. So you could have Chickasaw County or the Chickasaw Empire, turn that to Chickasaw County, and then the people who are of the Chickasaw Empire now become Negroes and enemies of the state, therefore rounded up as slaves, Negro slaves, meaning that because they were the people who had the property, meaning that they were of the land and for the land and by the land, that they could be turned, their property could be turned in, invested in them, and then the ownership of them would represent ownership of the land. You see? That's why you always see the slaves on the land, because this was the ancestral land that they peoples was always from, or up until the Civil War when they annexed it. Yet he created the way out through the 13th Amendment, 20th Section, 7th Article, in which they, bust him in the head for. The same article, or the same thing that they was going to try to use with what's his name, Kennedy, with the $2 bill and all of that. They didn't want to do that, because there were different banking trusts that came out of this that were vying for the repatriation of the true Moroccan, the true American government. And these elements were seeded throughout the rest of the empire, or the so-called Axis powers of the old world. And this, or thus, became the evident fact of how this became. So there are thousands of books and movies, again, I could list, man. Like I said, when the Days chose, or the Mamluks were allowed to create their own kingdom and rule for a time, that became the first aspect. That became, let's say, the second Jerusalem. The first Jerusalem was under Hugh de Péon, who was sent by Godfrey de Bouillon and was the mentor of Jacques de Molay, who were all being properly financed also through the de Medicis, Alessandro and them, from Spain as well as Venice, the black nobility of Venice, who were the descendants of the El Cid and those Moors of the Castile and Aragon line that helped displace the Almoravids, who then had to share with them the trade routes and access routes to Alamaricanos Estados, who up until that time, the Moriscos, who were grown out of the Moors over, let's say, they were there for 900 years, let's say 400 years of that, created the what they call the so-called Italian or mulatto race that was even more black than it is now. Yet, through the wars and through the expulsions and then switching sides and then Moors holding out in different places, they all began to switch in terms of complexion. And that's when the different laws was made to try to trap the true Moor from actually ascending back to his true position. So now he had to ally himself with one of the Franciscan kingdoms, which was really in alliance to one of the Holy Roman Emperor kingdoms, who were all in league to displace the Alamaricanos Estados Moors that was autochthonous over here. Because over here we wasn't dealing with all of the bullshit that they was bringing forth. And once they integrated, we all, to this day, still have evidence of that type of thinking in our blood. That's where it came from. To, again, alter the path of the true Asiatic, to stop the upliftment of humanity, which was the mission. Right? But because in the process of that, you have to uplift yourself. That's the unseen jewel in the science. Yet the science is dependent upon what and who you perceive the temple to be. And so most people of the old school have turned different aspects of people who have come and gone into idols. And that has created a backlash in spiritual energy, because then the adversary is using that as a mysticism to play on the wit of those of us who by any other means would know better. So I think in the end, it's really understanding that as Moor or Moorish American or American American or Tonkin American, there's a responsibility as that to include the experience also of that side. Like the white man accepts his Confederate side. He accepts that there was a part of his line that he had to, fight with or whatever to get in. We don't accept that with each other. You know what I'm saying? We try to, we get into arguments and it was just like, all right, that's it. I'm just never talking to this person again. That's an ancestral thing, you see, based upon this jealousy that existed somehow between how we was living here and how people that was living here after a while wanted to emulate how they seen these other people being. But these other people, again, was following Christianity or of derivative thereof. Therefore, they were not practicing the love vibration. Because the love vibration in the Christianity is coming through the brutality, or through the brutality that was being used as a methodology of control over the so-called Negro slave that was being imported from another place, while those of us that was born here was being imported somewhere else. We was getting off the boat being called an Indian, while he was getting off the boat here being called a nigger. You see? But he think that he speak Wolof, he speak Swahili. He don't know. So after a generation of brothers going through that, the old ones start teaching them, and then they keep them on their plantation, so they don't keep them around no real niggas that really know nothing. So in the real world, white people is being enslaved, thousands at a time, right, and constantly. That's what the abolitionist movement was really set up for, to free white people from being enslaved by the Barbary pirates, by the Barbary Moors, who after a while just started enslaving everybody. They just started bugging out. That don't mean that me as a Moor today is bad, but that does mean that I have that within my lineage. That barbarous, take what I want shit. But that's not a representation of what Moors are supposed to be. That's a fetishized. That's a fetish that was used to given to British sailors to make them want to fight better and emulate their enemy during the Opium Wars in China and all of that. Read the book, read the writings of Captain Cook and these people, man. So all these people wanted to be. All they mimicked themselves after. That's what they doing to this day. Look at the Magic Kingdom and look at the Habsburg Castle. It's the same place. Look at the architect of the Habsburg Castle. It's a nigga that look just like Michael Jordan. You know what I mean? So when we see the word Merovingian and then we see the word Moro Kush, we think they're two different things because this one was in England and this one was in Nubia. Then before we could really even do the knock to Moro Kush, they create the Aswan Dam and it flood the whole thing. But then I could go to Egypt anytime I want. See what I'm saying? So where was the true stuff at? And if that was the first place, then why in the Bible it said that the people who went over there first came from Canaan? In the Manasseh text, it talks about who Canaan really is. And that Canaan is connected to the Manasseh. The Manasseh is the tribe of Ben Ishmael. So that's us. That's the line that was so free that they didn't even wear clothes. When they came here and they went to the what they call the Sandwich Islands. And these people, they were starving. So the people brought them this yucca between this fish between two pieces of yucca, and they start eating it. And they couldn't pronounce the word, so they call it the sandwich. So they start calling the islands the Sandwich Islands. These Sandwich Islands are what we call Hawaii. It's how stupid these people are, man. Or were. You mean to tell me that these people can tell me authoritatively what it is other than by force? Like that's the only way. But in exerting no force, you see what I'm saying? There's no force being exerted by me other than the truth. But in that, I don't expect anything from anybody. So I'm not entering the cipher expecting to get something back from what I'm doing. All I'm striving to do is do what I can. What I get back is what little I can ask for. But I can't ask for what I'm given. I can only ask for the time it takes me to do it. You see? So there's a way, a structure of how to deal or how you're supposed to deal with public venues and things like that. But those forms of protocols were coming from a place called the House of Burgess, and they don't want, the burglars. They don't want to get people into that. Because then that's dealing with electors, exchequers, executors, that type of stuff. All of this sort of law or whatever was the leftover Roman law that the so-called Roman cross legions used to work over the last vestiges of what they call Old Carthage, which was the old Moroccan Empire, by breaking the Barbary. Because they were the link between us and them. The Barbaries of the old times, let's say between the 14, 15, 16, 17, 1800s, represented the Phoenician peoples and the Numidian peoples before that. So the ancient relationships, based upon the ancient aspects of these places being over here first, represents how the colonization started after the destruction, or what we call the sinking of Atlantis and all that other stuff, which again was brought about by the initial birth pains of the experiment that are playing itself out now to the end. But the overall absorption, if you will, you know what I mean, of the fourth, let's say third to fourth dimensional reality into the fifth, which manifests in the speed in which you assess and process the information being given. So the more you allow people to be what they're going to be and not take things personally from them and just do what you got to do, as weird as that sounds, as simple as that sounds, the more you're allowing the possibility for it to be done for you to happen. The problem I'm seeing comes when you follow the old Holy Roman Emperor way, which is you try to take control of the situation. You take control of the situation by entering the situation, knowing what you're going to do. So regardless of what the situation is, it don't matter. You know what you're doing. So you're not caught up in who and what is happening. You're there to accomplish what it is you're supposed to do. And that becomes the basis of your function, you know. And the more we process that function, the more we're able to understand that none of it is so evil, at least within our own self, that we are not as evil as they want to portray us to be, and how a lot of us has accepted we are. Just because you can be driven to the side of madness and driven to the side of almost an animal doesn't mean that that is your natural state. It's not your natural state if you're driven to it. See what I'm saying? It's not. It's not to do that. So what this means, everybody, is, again, try to function from a perspective where you as a Moorish American, you as an American, you as an Algonquin American, right? All of these represent the different spheres, of reality that you encompass, just like every name that you had represents a different level or sphere of reality that you representing getting to who you are. See, this is the difference between what Franz Berdon talked of as the protocol of things. When you allow things to elevate, you come about who you are by assessing the experiences that you've experienced and then relaying what those interpretations of those experiences are externally by your actions and deeds. These are the things that we perceive as time that moves us further into the future. So the future, again, is dependent upon the choices and actions that are made. This is why some of us feel the weight of procrastination when it comes to doing things that we know we're supposed to do. And sometimes we'll get defensive in the checking of that. Yet these are the things that remind you that there's a part of you that's human. And so because everybody was born, again, human, not necessarily human in the context of a physical being. Asiatics are born Asiatics. They are born human based upon what they think they are, you see. Whereas humans were the people who preceded the planet after the Asiatics and built upon the societies and civilization that the Asiatic people gave them. But when I say Asiatic, I'm talking about that so-called Elohims or the so-called Nephilim or whatever they want to, whatever's the new word, whatever's the new, whatever's the new black or whatever they want to say it is. Those people, some of these New Age people call them the Nakals, but that high fifth-dimensional plane, 6+ plane, where you're able to instantaneousize everything simultaneously, you are actually you. So this is achieved in the Asiatic through the pineal gland. It used to be the size of grapefruit. That's now the size of like a raisin. So it still doesn't displace the fact that it's still a phenomenal organ that, if activated properly, can process and analyze and acute billions of deciliters of information. Yet, if 90% of the information that's being ingested is a negative depiction, see, think about it. You saw all of these pictures of you as a Moor and all of this stuff when you was a kid. It was around then. These ain't new pictures. They didn't just paint them when you was in grade school and chose to put them out now that you was a Moor. Where they come from? How come you didn't see them then? Or did you see them then, but you knew them as something else? Or did you like me? See the picture of George Washington and say, oh, yeah, there's the slave next to him. Slave. But what slave I know wears a turban with a jewel and an ostrich? You know what I'm saying? And this is the problem. It becomes a critical mass when nobody has to know who and what they are. They just are with the flow. So they try to exert their sovereignty in ways that just don't match who they're supposed to be. And the more you remind them, the more they don't like that. That's why they don't want to deal with you when you come the right way. You know what I'm saying? Because when you come the right way, there's nothing they can really contract you with. So it's just about a quick ransom, you see? And they can't really get that because you don't really, it's trouble for them. So it's the benefit to be able to have something to fall back on, see what I'm saying, to allow yourself to do your work and then still do what you have to do. So there's no law that says that you can't be you based on your nationality. You can't receive this and you can't receive that. Why not? The Jews have a nationality and a state, and they be there, they whole family and the men in welfare, getting food stamps, getting money, getting food, getting vouchers, you know what I'm saying? Diamonds on everything. That's the difference between the Jews downtown and the Jews downtown and the Jews uptown. The rich white Jews uptown, they be broke too, but they'll go to the one pawn shop that only pawn like rich people shit where they could pawn it and then buy it back. They have them on rich people layaway. You know what I'm saying? All them old biddies up in the 70s, 80s, 90s and shit, upper east. Because all of them are old daughters of the American Revolution, which means that all of them were the prostitutes of the whores from World War I and II who had sex with all of the people, for all of the different soldiers from around the world, spread disease and all of that. I'm not trying to be disrespectful to anybody's ancestors, grandpeople, but this was some of the stuff that was going on. That's why you ask your grandmother about how they felt about sailors and stuff. They hated them people. They was the ones bringing syphilis and all that shit to the community when they would dock in the port. That's because the merchant marines and the Moors was taken out. Because Jim Crow, the laws that was being set up by the descendants of the Holy Roman Emperors that is now bleached out, that's now calling themselves the Knights of the KKK and all of that, they done locked up the South where they got a law against the descendants of the Negroes that their ancestors purposely miseducated. So the smart niggas from the north were the Moors who had sand. You see what I'm saying? So they didn't want them to interbreed with their niggas along the Mississippi, as well as in the what they call a hot zone, because then they would mess up their money, their sharecropping money. So in order, if you was a black man from the south, you would have to jump a ship to come up north, you see. And there was the merchant marines from that. And in that, they were the ones that, again, were used as the faces sometimes of the Americans when they would come in different places. They would always have the Moor with them because we were the ones that introduced them to the world. Then when people stopped seeing us and started seeing us as slaves to these white people, you see, that became the image. But this was the image that was adopted by the heads of the British, Spanish, and French, who were all descendants of the Holy Roman Emperors, the Gauls, who were in the process of bleaching out their line to alter their genetics and put the day line at the head of the L's and the Bays. So this became a system by which they accumulated their wealth and associated us in our land as cattle. All right, as cattle, property. That property being the physical body of the black man, black woman, black child. So there's, again, the descendants of Herod and Sardices and these people. These were the people who created that system. So the religion or the practice of killing Heru was also a ritual of dissociating the black family. See what I'm saying? The ritual of the resurrection of Heru was the black family coming back together, with the father having knowledge of self, meaning everybody could be realized. So you accumulate the knowledge based upon the size of your pineal gland. So imagine if you can't look at you having a pineal gland the size of a grapefruit, and having a regular human body. Think about it. You have a brain still. So that means that the brain has to be double the size or triple the size than it is now, right? Not quadruple. So imagine how big the skull is. Then imagine how big the body is. This is you and me. You see what I'm saying? That's why when you look at the movie Predators, you see that there was the big ones and the short ones. The big ones were the Asiatic, were the so-called African strain. And then the smaller ones were the Asiatic strain, who fought for honor at the end and helped Andrew and Brody free the girl. Because this was a representation of the Moorish clans, the L's and the Bays, as they went to war, and that led to the destruction of them at the hands of the Days. And then the Days created through the Spanish, again, first bleached out black people as a means to disseminate the empire, but then keep it secret through secret meetings and shrines where they dress up and go over the stories and how he was and things like that. While those of us who were really that in the public eye were now disassociated as a nation and now seen as either members of the nation we were in or fugitives or whatever. And that's how it is now. Therefore, a declaration of some kind is paramount to let them know that you are not what they have already ordained you to be based upon their Masonic or Freemasonic obligations that are used to disassociate you from your birthright and your inheritance. Therefore, anybody that's homegrown, one of the protocols of the work against you is that any homegrown being who, again, is Asiatic, who is producing something actually of truth that people can use and do whatever, they have to automatically be defamed in every generation. Ask yourself, look at who's doing those things now. These are the things that allow the disunity to actualize. Because everybody's secret, this is the time when everybody's secrets is out. Everybody. Nobody's exempt. That's why, with me, with what I do is public, you know what I'm saying, to a point. But everything that I do dealing with the real aspect of that has to be within those people who deal with me through the classes or, you know what I'm saying, private consultation and things like that. Because, man, everybody on the tape. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's real. It's real. It's not a joke. But again, same people that's doing it now, the same people, the simpler people doing it then. You got niggas hooking up with people, having babies, not even, like, just bugging, man. Having this knowledge, using it to mind control people. People sending me shit on Facebook about some chick doing all types of craziness with somebody, and they wind up dead. I'm like, wow. This is what it's come to? It's ritualized like that? Like, it can't. This is what's coming from these events. So, I don't know. Maybe we need to reassess. Or maybe not. At the same time, who am I? I'm just somebody who on the radio every Monday, you know, who have some classes and some material and literature that people could read. In the end, that's it. So, to defend what people have already, in a sense, understood is to be real, I'm not asking anybody to do that. All I'm saying is evaluate what it is you're understanding and see the pitfalls before you jump in. So you could get the map, and it could tell you that it's jewels at the end of the journey, but it's not going to tell you how to get over the pitfalls and everything else. So really, it's the journey. You can know how to get there or what the goal is, but you don't know how to get there, and that's where we are. We're in that 40 years of the wilderness, the children of Israel, because they've adopted other idols. Isn't Minaj an American idol? One of the first things they do is make you sacrifice what you love. So isn't she not with the dude she was with? No. But she ain't with nobody she didn't know. She had to be with somebody she is know, because that's how they got to take you out, because that's how they handle you. Most of these people come from jail. So there's different levels. And when you understand that, you understand that you're dealing with the hierarchy of Rome. That's why she's a saint. When you saw her with the red hood at the ritual of Whitney Houston being killed by Oscar Set, that was showing you that she was now to be ascended as the next one, the harlot of Babylon. You see? They went through the ritual with Montague and Capulet with Rahan and Chris Brown. See what that did? They laughing in everybody's face. Oprah, everybody. But did you know that Oprah owned 3 prisons? Look it up. Did you know that? I think one of them, I got to check again, I think one of them is noted for the amount of corporate clients that they have where they producing clothes and all of that. Did you know that? Do we even care at this point? That's the other point. Do we even care? Does it even matter? It doesn't, because all of that has to do with the United States. That's not your country. Regardless to what they say, regardless to what they want to say, being a Moor or as a Moor, you can believe what you want to believe. But as a nationality and a flag, you have one that is already recognized and already put down and already has a trust associated once you know how to work it. And as you are ordained and nationalized by your authority, nobody can tell you that you're not. The burden of proof is on them. Therefore, the proof has to be set. Say if not. Therefore, they have no ability to say that you aren't who you are, and neither do you. But you have the ability to deny it. And you deny it by accepting the false designations or whatever it is that isn't associated with something that isn't actualized in the world. This is what it means to be actualized by your deeds, so you can shoot up and kill as many people as you want. After everybody's dead, and now it's time to set something up, what happens when people find out you can't read and write? How you going to write a constitution? How you going to create a proclamation? How you going to zone out where the community going to be? Who going to do that? Oh, the nigga that knew how to do that, we shot him back then because, you know, he made us look bad. Like, this is where your movement is. And I'm not making fun. I'm keeping it real with you. And I'm not just talking about the black so-called conscious movement. I'm talking about the so-called human resistance movement. You're totally infiltrated. You're totally open. You're totally void. And that's the funny thing, we all are, because this is the surveillance age. We went from the technological age, from the atomic age to the technological age to the surveillance age. So everybody's open. Everybody's under surveillance. Everybody's watching everybody, and nobody is watching anybody do anything productive. So I don't think that it's that they don't want you to do nothing right, and they think, yeah, all of that shit is out there. They got their but it ain't who you think. It's Steve. It ain't Mr. Candy. Mr. Candy's an actor. That nigga's an actor who just happens to be in a position where people are trained to believe that they are animals. That's all your steward is doing to you. The magistrate, the police, the army. This is all it is. This is why so many people in the army is conscious. There's mad conscious people in the army now, son. Mad at them niggas in there. Just mad at them. Watching DVDs and all that in the barracks. White officer walking by them like, yo, what's that, soldier? Oh. That's Brother Dawood, sir. Like, oh, yeah, I used to watch him. Like, that's how it is now. Like, shit is bugged out, yo. Shit is open. These niggas don't even care no more, man. Like, everybody's in this shit. And it's cool. It's like, yo, this is what it is. But in that, everybody there is still from their home country. So when it really goes down, what they don't realize is it's going to start amongst them first. It ain't going to be us. It ain't going to be regular people. Regular people ain't going to do shit until they ready to do shit. And it's something going to click online. That's why it ain't happened yet. They setting it all up. He's setting it all up. That's why he said, I'm going to stop and look back at this because this is going to be the last time. He wasn't just talking about his term, nigga. This is what he's saying. And they're going to use him to do it. Go online and check out Alien Obama's head. See what comes up. It's funny. Like, it's so plausible that it's absurd. And that is where the United States is right now. It is what it portrays itself to be in movies. Unreal. That's what it is. So they have gotten citizens of the United States to accept anything. They'll do anything just to be on TV. Anything, man. They patterned this after a Japanese program that was over there now. On Japanese programming, it's very, there's aspects of it that's very sexualized, where they have mass sexual acts and groping and stuff online and stuff, and that translates as porn over here, but over there it's programming. And this is what they're using to influence people's libido towards a certain stimulus. So you can be attracted to who you want, marry who you want. But if you want more, you better nationalize them somehow under you. And I mean for real, not like just, getting a nationality card. That ain't going to do it. They're not telling you right now, people that's doing paperwork, they're not telling you right now who's buying paperwork, listen, they're not telling you right now that the term right to travel has now been co-opted by the enemy, is now being seen as an aspect of privilege of state. So if you have a right to travel document, that document is aspect or seized. That's why I use the term seize so much. He's telling you what they're going to try to do. That's why you got to be who you want to be, man, and understand what that means. So that way, God forbid something happen, there is an aspect or some sort of remedy where we not just put with the herd, but everybody else. This don't mean that we ain't going to have to fight or do whatever we have to do, but it is to me that there is an aspect of diplomatic relief that can be said. But at the stage now, everybody's listed as property. Regards to how many black shrines and holistic churches and all this other shit and punks and all this type of black, red, black, and green and gun, all that you got don't matter. It don't matter. Because they seeing you as an enemy of the state, because they still haven't reinstated, they haven't stopped the war amendment since Lincoln. That's the other thing they didn't like about Kennedy. He was going to dead that. He was going to turn the whole shit back into a republic. So basically, he was ruling the United States government as a national. But he was born a 14th Amendment citizen and a Jesuit, Knights Malta. So you see the conundrum. So again, you are found victim by your own shit. So because he was already down with that, they already had to have ties in him. There's no pictures of me with no, what you call it, man? No, you know what I'm saying? Like, all of the shit that you see me wearing is shit that I got from a thrift store or some other shit. Ain't nobody telling me to wear that. That's what I chose to wear. Whether you like it or not. Like, you know what I'm saying? There's no pictures of me with no Masonic apron nowhere. There's no pictures like that. So there's no way that there's no connection to me with them niggas like that, other than the legacy that came through the parents. But I already showed and proved what that is by doing this. So nobody cannot say that I'm not who I am. I am that I am. So long as I create the credentials that all of that represents that, then I should be cool. Because I have the faith of a theocratic autonomy with me that exists in the perpetual nature of God. Say again? With the perpetual nature of God that is given to everyone. Everybody have the right to be what they want to be. That's why religion is so powerful. It's the basis of what they use to enslave everybody. So they can't now say that it's void, because then they're saying they're void, because they're the one that gave it to everybody. Religion was here when I got here. It was already going on. People were already doing that. So it's not something that I am choosing to be a part of. It's something that is. Yet when I say religion, I know what that means for me. And it's not for me to have to express that to everybody else. It's for me to express that to who I'm supposed to express that to through fellowship. So if the fellowship means that me reading the Bible allows me to reach more people, then I can read the Bible. Because I'm not a Christian reading the Bible. I'm a Moor reading the Bible. So if I'm reading the Bible, the Quran, the Rig Veda, the Ramayana, the Dhammapada, the Ur, the Chaldees, the Zoroastrian text, the Emerald Tablets, the Nag Hammadi, all of it is being read as somebody who understands who and what they are. For me. Even if the shit turned out to not to be real, it's real to me. You see what I'm saying? So I don't care what anybody else wants to say it is, and don't feel the need to defend what already is supposed to be. It is what it is. If it wasn't for somebody, it would, like the prophet or whatever, we wouldn't have nothing to talk about. You know what I'm saying? Niggas can say what they want, but if it wasn't for these ancient men who did what they were supposed to do, I wouldn't be able to be where I'm at. So there had to be something profitable of that. I let my wife do this. I had my child do this. You can't tell me that this thing is somehow pervertedly Luciferian because this person may have done that or this person may have done this. There's people that's out in the community right now raping people, man. Beating chicks up. People going to see these people talk, man. But game recognized game. There's other work for me to do. If somebody want to deal with that, they need to deal with that. And it's going to come out because this is the time when all that stuff comes out. That's how I know. But again, I know what my mission is. Therefore, I have to do that. And in doing that, I'm protected in doing that. Because that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm not doing something else. Therefore, I'm not going to receive a negative outcome. You see what I'm saying? I'm being who I'm supposed to be. Not because I'm trying to get people to do it. Like, this don't have nothing. This ain't a gang. You know what I'm saying? This ain't a clique. This ain't a club. You know what I mean? Well, it's a national club. It's a national club or a national confederation. That's true. But in that means something. So just because I do that don't mean I can't rap and I can't write and I can't draw and have fun and laugh and have good conversations with people who happen to be melanin less, as they say, you know. Because some of them people will treat me better than people that's darker than me. So what does that say? That's my fault too? I'm attracting that? Law of attraction, I'm not putting that out. I'm not putting out that I hate white people, that I hate black people. I hate liars. I hate people that's not chivalrous. I hate people that's not going to keep their word and people that's going to try to block what they already know that God has already ordained. It's already written that this is what it's supposed to be. So in 20 to 35 years, this is all it's going to be. And that's when everybody is going to be running up to you, asking you, yo, how I do that, how I get down with that. Because the white man then finally going to say, oh, well, you know, they was right about this shit. That's all it is. That's what Django was. That's why Spike Django, the people who hate Django are the people who can't be free no more. Because they done sold their children to this thing. That's what Herod and them do. That's what the Sadducees and the Pharisees do. They sacrifice their children to marriage. If you knew what some of these celebrities was really doing with some of these children, you would bug out. But not being no Mason don't mean that I can't keep no secret. And what that means is, again, literally, just so you hear from me, is that it's not for me to blow these people up for what they're trying to do. Because, believe it or not, some people find that's attractive. They like hearing about that. They like hearing that these people is doing all of these crazy shit to people. To make them feel like they're better than these people. When these people started out just like me and you. They all was babies, those that was born from wombs, at least. I'm not talking about these Mariah Carey, Moroccan, in Maryland, like all of that. All of that, it's sad, man. I feel sorry for Nick Cannon, man. He got to eat that. But this is what they all sign up for. So when I see people or hear people, you know, moving up for certain shit and trying to do certain shit, it bugs me out. But it don't surprise me because this is what they're going to do. Yeah, and he had money. And has it. But due to knowledge, as soon as R. Kelly dropped the closet shit, that's when all of that legal shit went away. That shit was gone. Say he got miles of that. They say he got reels and miles of that. We actually using people's names in the shit. That's insurance. He done freaked the game to such a point that he got his alibis in the form of songs. Yo, this nigga's ill, yo. The nigga's ill. He was programmed by the best. That's the difference between R. Kelly and the Pied Piper. That's why all that shit went away. And where's he from? Chicago. You see what I'm saying? This is all a grand design. Order out of chaos. This is what's going on, man. And all of this tribal warfare and clannish warfare you see going down, remember, this is the time when your ancestors are in you. And every one of them has something good to contribute and something that probably wasn't so good. And it's up to you to decide whether or not whatever you find out or don't find out is what you is going to base what they now told you. But most of the people who you don't look at be the ones who got the most thing. There are people that still celebrating Kwanzaa, man. You understand? It didn't already come out about Karanga and all of that. Everybody know about that whole thing with the Panther and all of that. And as much as they wanted to do, they could only do but so much because they was doing it as 14th Amendment citizens. So regardless of what they had, the United States could lay claim to it. And that's what happened. That's why they was talking about an FBI. Hoover. The Grand 33rd Degree Mason. Truman started digging for the cornerstone and found it. It's what the white boys ain't telling you. They found it and he cut it up into 50 pieces and marked each one with a symbol, and each lodge in the 50 states got one. That's to represent, again, the cornerstone of the United States. But the Capitol building cornerstone is missing too. So the cornerstone of the United States is missing, both the Capitol and the so-called White House. The White House became known as the White House because Teddy Roosevelt who's a member of the Albino White Brotherhood, called the Porcelain Club, called it that on some stationery. And that's what they started calling it ever since then. He was the one who went to war with the last Barbary pirate, Moorally Ishmael. So he was the one who instituted the protocol that led to, again, the further disassociation of the Moors. While at the same time, the Islamite Moors was the ones they was going at, but because now the Canaanite thing had been set up through the Moroccan Jew thing, based upon a treaty that the British king made the Americans and everybody else observe, they had to recognize us as interpreters for them, then protected us. And so in the process of that, as we close out, this is the time when we're supposed to repatriate back to the state of which we reside. Yet, if that state is confused and hasn't established itself as a dominant state within itself, such as something like Yamasi or somebody else, then it's not going to fly. They still going to try to move on you. You got to do it where they got you like Cuba, where they can't really come at you like that. And that's all connected, again, to the prophet. So if you want to find out more about that and deal with it on a personal, government-to-government basis, please holler at me at houseofel@hotmail.com, as well as check out www.aseertheducateers.com for any of the materials we have up there. Also, check out www.darkskull418.com. That's to get the book, The Dark Skull 418. It's a great read. The cartoon and toys coming soon, inshallah. And also check out www.cookingmorewithless.com or www.blackmambaworkouts.com. Oh, as well as www.sagaassad.com. But again, for any lectures or book signings or readings or consultations, musical performances, whatever features, whatever, holler at me at houseofel@hotmail.com. Again, blessings to the ancestors, blessings to you for listening. Thank you. I hope that you got some real knowledge from it. You can get the book Voodoo, The Voodoo Quantum Leap, also Othello's Children in the New World, also The Lost Book of Enki is interesting, The 13th Tribe by Kostler, Section Raised Volumes 1 to 2, as well as some of the other book lists or books that we have listed on our website, www.darkskull418.com. So again, holler at me for that, for book signings or anything, at houseofel@hotmail.com. With that, we say peace. Also, if anybody wants to leave a donation or donations, they greatly appreciate it. You can go to dukeoftears@gmail.com. That's DUKEOFTIERS@gmail.com. Through PayPal. We definitely appreciate it, and thank you. Peace. This show is dedicated to Victory Rose, Heru, and